What if your breath was more powerful than your thoughts? What if the very thing you've been chasing through effort, belief, and visualization was already available, not in your mind, but in the rhythm of your body? Tonight, we'll step into a quieter understanding of reality. This is not about manifesting from force or fixing yourself to become worthy. It's about remembering the portal that's always been within you, your nervous system. So before we begin, take a breath. Notice where you are. Maybe you're curled in bed. Maybe you're listening on a long drive. Maybe it's midnight where you are, or just before dawn. Wherever you are, you've arrived in the perfect moment. Subscribe, so when we meet again, this door stays open. Because tonight's story is not a story at all. It's a recalibration, a remembering, a slow unfolding of how the universe responds not to your words, but to your frequency. We'll explore the sacred bridge between your biology and your destiny, where coherence becomes the language of creation. You don't have to earn your alignment. You just have to tune to it. And as you listen, something old in you may awaken, knowing that your future doesn't come from outside. It emerges from the stillness you're about to feel. You may believe you've heard this before, that reality responds to your thoughts, that your mind holds the key to what you attract, that manifestation is a game of belief. But what if that's only the surface? What if the real engine beneath? Creation isn't your thoughts at all, but the language your body speaks silently, constantly, beneath every affirmation, beneath every visualization, beneath every goal. What if the field of infinite potential doesn't respond to what you say, but to how you breathe, how you feel, how you hold yourself when no one is watching? What if reality is listening not to your words, but to your nervous system? Your body has been whispering this secret to you your entire life. You felt it in the space between your ribs when fear took hold, in the flutter behind your sternum before a decision, in the way your breath vanished when your truth wanted to speak. But your safety wasn't sure. These were not just sensations, they were signals. The world didn't just happen to you. It mirrored those signals back. A moment of tension rippled out like a broadcast. A single pause of presence shifted outcomes. And you've always known this, quietly. Not as a fact, but as a feeling. A pattern. A hum beneath the events, you could explain. The nervous system is not a background process. It's a master frequency conductor. It doesn't just sense the world, it shapes the world you see. When your body feels safe, your awareness opens. Possibilities appear that were always there, but previously invisible. You don't manifest new reality out of thin air. You become available to timelines that were previously hidden behind the veil of fight or flight. Your biology is not an obstacle to your spiritual expansion. It is the portal. Let's begin here, not in the stars, but in the spine. Imagine your nervous system as a coiled river of intelligence, running from the base of your body to the crown of your head. When you are in fear, it constricts like a dam. When you are in presence, it flows. The field around you, this quantum sea of vibration and potential, responds to the shape of that flow. If your body is clenched, your field is cluttered. If your breath is shallow, your clarity is dim. But if your body is in harmony, if breath, heartbeat, and presence begin to synchronize, you send a new signal into the field. And that signal is not a request. It is an announcement. This is who I am now. Most people try to think their way into change. They write goals, recite mantras, adjust their mindset. But energy does not move from mind down. It moves from nervous system out. You can speak abundance all day long, but if your gut is tight with tension and your chest is collapsed inward, the signal the field receives is fear. And the field will mirror it not as punishment, but as precision. The universe doesn't deliver based on what you want. It delivers based on what you are attuned to. And your nervous system is the tuning fork dot. There is a specific moment, a kind of quantum hinge that many overlook. It's the instant you catch yourself in reactivity. The moment your stomach knots in old patterns, when urgency pulses in your hands, when your thoughts race ahead to defend, retreat, or control. Most think they've failed in these moments, that they've slipped back into chaos. But what if these moments are the actual doorway? What if that flicker of discomfort is not your downfall, but your signal of initiation? The first invitation to respond differently, to tune differently. Coherence begins here, not in peace, but in presence. What does coherence mean? In quantum physics, it refers to the alignment of wave patterns, when different energies sync into resonance, amplifying one another. In your body, coherence happens when your system's heart rate, breath rhythm, brain waves begin to move in harmony. This isn't metaphor, it's measurable. And when it happens, your electromagnetic field grows stronger, clearer, more stable. You become a steady beacon in the quantum noise. And just like tuning a radio, clarity begets reception. Your reality starts to shift, not because you've forced it, but because you've become legible to timelines that previously could not find you. But coherence isn't about being calm all the time. It isn't about erasing emotion. In fact, your emotion is one of your greatest tuning tools when met with safety. When you feel deeply without collapsing into panic or suppression, your body learns something extraordinary. I can feel this and still be okay. That is the new signal. That is the quantum code. You are no longer running from your state. You are stabilizing through it. Let's slow it down. Imagine a breath not just as oxygen, but as message. Inhale gently, not to fill, but to greet. Your body with attention. Hold for a moment, not to control, but to listen. Then exhale, longer than the inhale, like a soft release of static. Do it again. This time, imagine the inhale pulling energy from the earth up through your spine, reminding you of your rootedness. The exhale lets go of every outdated tension your cells no longer need. This is not visualization. This is vibration. As you continue this breath, something begins to change. Not dramatically, but quietly. Your chest softens. Your awareness stretches. Beyond the walls of your skull, you feel the edges of your body blur. And then you notice something strange, something ancient. The silence between thoughts is not empty. It's alive. It hums. It pulses. It listens back. This is coherence awakening. Not as a goal, but as your natural state. Remember, and in that moment, you may begin to understand the nervous system is not a limiter of spirit. It is spirit's language. It is the translator of frequency into form. The tighter its wound, the narrower your world becomes. The more relaxed it feels, the wider your field expands. And this is not philosophy, it's physics. Your body is a transmitter, and now it's remembering how to tune. You do not need years of mastery to enter coherence. You need only one honest moment of presence, one breath that you actually feel, one pause where you choose sensation over story. That's enough to shift the timeline. Why? Because the quantum field doesn't operate on scale. It operates on signal. One precise, embodied frequency of alignment ripples outward far more powerfully than 1,000 frantic thoughts. The universe doesn't reward effort, it reflects. Resonance. This is why so many people get stuck in loops. They change their words, their affirmations, even their habits, but they don't change their state. And so the field keeps mirroring the same song, because the vibration underneath remains the same. But you're remembering now. You're learning the deeper language, the one below language, the one your body already speaks fluently. When given permission. So tonight, let it be simple. Let it be soft. When your body clenches, don't panic witness. When your chest flutters, don't judge breathe. When your thoughts tighten like a storm anchor into your spine, place a hand on your heart, not as ritual, but as signal. Say gently, I am here. That is the reset. That is the shift. That is coherence entering the system. And coherence, once touched, begins to teach you. It teaches you that you don't need to chase, that you don't need to fix, that you don't need to prove. You need to tune. When your signal stabilizes, life rearranges. The people, opportunities, and experiences that match your new state begin to appear, not as magic, but as alignment. And the nervous system that once froze in fear now becomes your most sacred guide, the body's wisdom leading the soul's direction. Because coherence doesn't erase the human experience, it refines it. You still feel, you still stumble, but you respond from a different bandwidth. You meet challenge from a new baseline. And slowly, gently, your life stops reacting from trauma and starts creating from truth. There's a quiet intelligence beneath the surface of your life that most never learn to trust. It doesn't shout. It doesn't explain. It doesn't argue for its reality. It simply waits beneath the noise of overthinking, beneath the rush of performance, beneath the pressure to get it right. It waits in the body, and it speaks. Through coherence, not through logic, but through sensation. Not through evidence, but through resonance. The real shift happens when you stop demanding that your nervous system justify its messages to your mind. Instead, you listen. You feel. You begin to notice that guidance isn't conceptual, it's vibrational. Consider how often you've overridden your own knowing. Not because you didn't feel it, but because the world trained you to ignore it. You sensed the tension before. You said yes. You felt the contraction before you chased the goal. You noticed the flicker of unease before the opportunity. But you pressed on. Because fear of missing out, fear of judgment, fear of not surviving as you are. All these fears have taught your biology to collapse its truth in favor of safety. And this is not your fault. This was the program. But coherence is the new instruction. Coherence says, your safety is no longer dependent on betrayal. Your power is no longer found in tension. It lives in the space where truth meets breath. This is how the quantum field begins to change, not through drama, but through permission. You permit your body to tell the truth. You permit stillness to be enough. You permit the subtle to be valid. And something begins to recalibrate. The space around you feels different. The thoughts you attract shift tone. Synchronicities begin to occur, not because you're forcing them, but because your field is no longer tangled. It's attuned. Like a radio station free from static, your life begins to sound like clarity. Let's return to the breath, but this time add texture. Inhale not only as a function, but as an offering. Let the breath rise through your belly, up through the heart, and into the chest like a warm current of awareness. Pause not out of control, but reverence. Exhale as if releasing centuries of stored bracing. Let the breath leave with meaning. Then do it again. Each time you breathe like this, you're sending a signal not just to your brain, but to every organ, every cell, every strand of fascia in your body. You are safe now. This safety is the seedbed of manifestation. Not the thought of safety, but the biology of it. Now imagine this. Every emotion you resist gets stored somewhere. Not out of malice, but out of loyalty. Your body holds on to what you won't feel, because it believes it's helping you survive. But the moment you allow sensation to pass through without flinching, without freezing, without narrating, you unlock that frozen energy. And released energy becomes available creation. This is why so much manifestation feels like pushing a rock uphill, because your body is still holding the brakes. But when you begin to move energy, softly, patiently, with trust, the brakes begin to release, not all at once, but piece by piece. The weight lessens. The path smooths. Your timeline speeds up not in chaos, but in clarity. Most people think coherence means perfection. That to manifest, you must become some flawless monk floating on a cloud of peace. But coherence doesn't require constant calm. It only requires honesty. Can you stay with yourself when you feel afraid? Can you breathe with the moment instead of leaving it? Can you stay soft in the presence of discomfort? That's coherence, not bliss, but bravery. The brave act of not abandoning your body when it needs you most. And when you do that, something miraculous begins. Your future self starts to arrive early, in whispers, in moments, in sensations that feel strangely familiar, even though you never lived them. That's the signal of alignment. Not fireworks, not certainty, but a quiet recognition. This feels like me. And when that feeling appears, stay. Don't rush to define it. Don't try to monetize it. Name it, explain it, let it grow roots. Let the nervous system get used to peace without panic. Let your biology memorize what it feels like to hold expansion without fear of collapse. That's how identity changes. Not from outside in, but from body up. You are not becoming someone else. You are stabilizing the frequency you are always built to carry. Coherence also reveals what no longer fits. And that, too, is a sacred part of the process. As your field stabilizes, relationships may shift, patterns may break. Addictions to chaos may no longer seduce you, not because you force them to leave, but because they cannot breathe in the clarity you now embody. This is loss, but also liberation. You begin to grieve the identities you no longer need. You begin to shed the agreements that once protected you, but now cage you. And even in the sadness of that release, there is something holy, something pure. Because finally, you are not abandoning yourself to belong. You are belonging to yourself to transform. There is a moment in coherence that feels like silence, but it is not empty. It is the rich pause between breaths, the place where new timelines write themselves. In this pause, your body stops fighting, your energy stops leaking, and all the momentum you've been searching for externally begins to rise from within. You may find yourself doing less, but achieving more. You may find yourself speaking softer, but being heard more deeply. You may find yourself resting and yet receiving everything you once chased. This is not laziness. This is energetic efficiency. This is what happens when your field stops contradicting itself. When your presence no longer wavers between fear and trust, but leans steadily into alignment, you become undeniable, and you stop needing to convince anyone of your value. Not because you've stopped caring, but because your value is now embodied, not performed. Your nervous system no longer scans for danger in every interaction. It no longer interprets silence as threat. It no longer demands urgency for proof of worth. Instead, it becomes a steady flame, and that flame lights the path forward. Not always clearly, not always quickly, but consistently. And the consistency is what builds a new future. This is when people around you begin to say things like, "Something's different about you," even if they can't explain why. You haven't become louder. You've become clearer. You haven't become more perfect. You've become more present. And presence always changes the room, even in silence. Coherence also softens your vision. It stops demanding certainty from the unknown. It stops rushing into answers. You begin to see reality not as something you control, but as something you collaborate with. Your awareness becomes the invitation, not the demand. And from this place, even your challenges feel different. They're not punishments. They're recalibrations. Reminders to return to the body, return to the breath, return to now. Here's something else no one tells you. Your coherence helps others regulate. Not because you fix them, not because you advise them, but because nervous systems co-regulate. When someone in the room is safe in their body, others feel it, without a word. Your breath becomes the anchor for someone else's panic. Your presence becomes the mirror that reminds others what calm feels like. And this is sacred work. This is healing that doesn't require effort. It requires resonance. So even when you don't have the words, even when you're still learning, even when you still tremble, you're helping. Just by staying. Just by choosing safety without collapse. Just by becoming the coherence you once sought from others. You are not too sensitive. You are finely tuned. And your tuning is the beginning of a new kind of reality. Not just for you, but for everyone you touch. There comes a moment in every journey of awakening when you realize you're no longer trying to become someone new. You're remembering who you've always been. Not in a grand mystical flash, but in a quiet reunion. A stillness between moments. A breath that no longer trembles. A silence that doesn't demand to be filled. This is the moment when coherence stops being a concept and becomes your nature. Not something you perform, something you inhabit. You begin to notice the subtle architecture of your days shifting. Not with fireworks, but with precision. The conversations you once avoided now unfold with ease. The choices you once delayed now feel obvious. Not because your life has become easier, but because your body is no longer resisting the signal of truth. It's attuned. And in that attunement, the quantum field becomes less of a mystery and more of a mirror. You no longer ask, how do I get there? Because you've realized there is here when you are in resonance. What once looked like fate now feels like feedback. You no longer interpret chaos as punishment. You interpret it as recalibration. You no longer need to rush to fix what feels uncomfortable because you understand that discomfort is often data. Data from the nervous system, alerting you to misalignment. But instead of spiraling, you pause. Instead of bracing, you breathe. And this too is manifestation. Not the flashy kind, but the kind that shapes the invisible scaffolding of your life. The kind that aligns you with the timeline you were always meant to meet. In this coherence, identity becomes fluid. You stop clinging to old roles. You stop defending past stories. You stop needing the external world to validate your becoming, because you no longer feel like a stranger to yourself. Your breath becomes familiar. Your pace becomes sacred. Your presence becomes home. And this is what most people miss when chasing transformation. They look for evidence before embodiment. They look for the result before the regulation. But true reality shifting doesn't happen when the world changes. It happens when your nervous system stops expecting danger. When your body no longer contracts in anticipation of failure. When your energy no longer fractures under pressure. That's when the world rearranges. Because you're no longer sending mixed signals. You are stable. You are legible. You are coherent. Even time starts to feel different. Moments stretch. Pauses deepen. What used to feel like urgency now feels like choice. You no longer rush into action because of fear. You move when your body signals readiness. And in that delay, there is power. Because alignment is more efficient than anxiety. The energy you used to spend second-guessing now becomes creative. Fuel. The space you once filled with noise becomes receptive ground. Ideas land. Connections form. And synchronicities begin to stitch your life into a pattern you didn't need to design. You simply needed to allow. This is the soft technology of being. Not the push of achievement, but the pull of resonance. Not the blueprint of goals, but the compass of frequency. When your nervous system is coherent, your life stops being something to manage and starts becoming something to witness. But coherence doesn't mean immunity from emotion. It means intimacy with emotion. You still feel sadness. You still feel anger. You still feel fear. But these states no longer possess you. You meet them. You move with them. You feel them as guests, not tyrants. And this is what it means to be free. Not to feel nothing, but to be enslaved by nothing. There will still be days when your signal falters, when old patterns return like ghosts asking to be fed, when the breath feels shallow, when the tension creeps back in. But now you know what to do. You don't run. You don't collapse. You return to the body, to the breath, to the portal. You say, this is a moment of remembering. You soften. You regulate. You shift. And your reality shifts with you. This is not repetition. This is refinement. Like tuning an instrument, coherence deepens with time. It expands as you practice, not just when things are calm, but especially when things are not. That's where your new identity stabilizes, not in peace, but in presence under pressure. The signal that once cracked under stress now remains clear, even in storms. And the universe, always listening, begins to reflect your new broadcast, not someday, but now. Because reality is not waiting for perfection. It's waiting for precision. And coherence is precision in motion. There's another truth that emerges here. The more you regulate, the more you remember that you were never alone in this tuning. The field has always been in relationship with you. The people you meet, the opportunities you feel, the visions you receive, they're not random. They're responses. They're the echo of your alignment made visible. And suddenly, life begins to feel like a dialogue again. You send a signal, and the signal returns. Not always as expected, but always as reflection. The sacredness of this can be overwhelming. To realize that you've always been heard, that your pain was never ignored, that your longing was never dismissed. It was simply that your signal was tangled, chaotic, distorted by fear. But now, with each breath, you're clarifying. You're clarifying who you are, what you stand for, what you're available for, and what you will no longer carry forward. This is the moment when coherence becomes courage. Not the courage to fight, but the courage to feel. To stay open in the face of uncertainty. To trust timing instead of forcing timelines. To rest when your body asks, not because you're lazy, but because you're wise. You start to embody what many only intellectualize. That your nervous system is not just the battleground of your trauma. It is the instrument of your evolution. And every time you regulate, every time you choose awareness over urgency, you're not just healing. You're broadcasting a new signal into the collective field. You're becoming the coherence you wish to see in the world, and the world responds. Sometimes slowly, sometimes immediately, but always with precision. You meet people who mirror your growth. You leave spaces that can't hold your new frequency. You receive insight not through striving, but through silence. And slowly, gently, you stop looking for the next technique, the next book, the next guru. Because the clearest guidance is now coming from within. You are no longer a seeker. You are a signal, and your signal is strong. So now, when the old urges return to hustle, to fix, to over-explain, you smile, you breathe. You place your hand on your heart and say, "Thank you for trying to protect me, but I no longer live there." And with that declaration, the field shifts again, because your biology has spoken. And biology speaks louder than belief. This is the true reprogramming, not of your thoughts, but of your signals. When your body trusts safety, it stops looping. When your cells trust presence, they stop bracing. When your field trusts alignment, it opens. And then you arrive, not a destination, but in yourself. Not as an idea, but as a frequency. Coherent, clear, awake. You no longer need to be loud to be heard. You no longer need to be certain to move forward. You no longer need to be perfect to be powerful. You simply need to stay tuned, because the field is listening. And now, it understands you. It's a strange thing when the patterns that once defined your identity begin to dissolve. You start to feel like you're floating between versions of yourself. The one who once flinched, performed, chased still echoes inside you, but her voice is no longer the guide. Instead, something quieter emerges, something slower. Not numbness, not detachment, but presence without panic, stillness without surrender. This is the nervous system healing in real time, not through theories, but through rituals of response. Every moment you stay present with discomfort, every time you pause. Instead of rush, breathe instead of brace, you're teaching your biology a new language. Safety without silence, power without pressure. You notice that clarity no longer arrives through thinking. It comes through sensation. A subtle flutter in your gut, a warmth across your chest, a soft expansion at the crown. These aren't metaphors, they're frequency markers. Real-time signals that your field is shifting. Your nervous system doesn't wait for language. It moves with immediacy, with truth. And as you stop arguing with what you feel, life begins to organize around your alignment. The world doesn't change because you demanded it. It changes because your signal finally allowed it to. This is where deeper rituals emerge, not because someone told you to, but because your body craves them. You find yourself waking slowly, placing your bare feet on the floor as if speaking to the earth. You close your eyes for 3 seconds before answering the phone. You place a hand on your chest before making a decision. These gestures may seem small, even invisible to others, but they are not for others. They are tuning practices, anchors in the field, acts of coherence that declare, I am not here to react, I am here to remember. And what you're remembering is not new, it's ancestral. Cellular, the body has always known how to be in rhythm. It's just that trauma interrupted the music. But now, the song is returning. And as it returns, you realize something radical. You are allowed to feel safe even when things are uncertain. You are allowed to feel joy even when others don't understand. You are allowed to rest even when the world screams hustle. These permissions don't make you selfish. They make you sovereign. This sovereignty is not dominance. It is not resistance. It is the calm certainty that your alignment matters, not only for your own life, but for the collective timeline we're all shaping. Because when even one person stabilizes in coherence, the signal ripples outward. Children feel it. Partners notice it. Strangers absorb it, not through conversation, through resonance. You don't have to convince anyone of your evolution. You only have to embody it. And embodiment isn't perfection. It's repetition. Returning to breath. Returning to spine. Returning to the moment. Again and again. Even when you forget. Especially when you forget. This is the sacred art of remembering. You begin to move through life differently. You sense energies before they speak. You walk into rooms and feel timelines. You meet people and know instantly, my nervous system can rest here, or this is not safe for me. You stop asking, what's wrong with me? And start asking, what is my body showing me? You don't analyze every thought, you feel the frequency underneath it. And the field responds not to your analysis, but to your felt awareness. There is a difference between knowledge and knowing. Knowledge is stored in the mind. Knowing is stored in the body. And now, you are reclaiming your knowing. Not just about others, but about yourself. You begin to recognize when you're abandoning yourself. When you say yes with a clenched jaw. When you smile with a sinking belly. When you agree with a voice that wants to scream. But now, instead of shaming those moments, you pause. You exhale. You recalibrate. You return to your signal. And this too is healing. Not fixing, not improving, but witnessing. You learn to let go of the need to be understood, not from pain, but from peace. You realize that not everyone can feel what you feel. That some people still live inside their bracing. And that's okay. You don't need to contract in order to connect. You simply stay rooted in your coherence and let those who resonate find you. This is not isolation. It's discernment. Your nervous system no longer confuses familiarity with safety. Just because it feels like home doesn't mean it's healthy. Just because it feels like love doesn't mean it's regulation. Now, you choose relationships that match your frequency, not just your history. And this is the quiet revolution. You are no longer addicted to chaos. You are no longer loyal to pain. You are no longer sourcing your value from how much you endure. No, your presence speaks first. And in that presence, you begin to access creative energy. Not forced productivity, but embodied expression. Ideas flow. Words land. You speak without rehearsing. You act without overthinking, because the signal is clean, the bandwidth is clear, and the future isn't something you wait for, it's something you express now. This is what makes coherence magnetic, not effort, but signal purity. You become a tuning fork for alignment. People feel better around you, not because you give advice, but because you give permission. Permission to slow down, to feel deeply, to stop pretending, to exhale. You're not here to fix the world. You're here to become the coherence that reshapes the field. And now, the field is responding. You notice the subtle timing of life begin to shift. The email arrives just after you soften your grip. The invitation comes when you finally let go. The insight appears when you're walking, not thinking. This is the dance of resonance. It's not linear, it's not logical, it's relational. And it asks one thing of you: remain regulated enough to receive. There will still be tests, old patterns dressed in new clothes, challenges that poke the bruises you thought had healed. But now, you meet them differently. You breathe, you observe, you shift. The goal is not to avoid discomfort. The goal is to hold coherence through it. And the more you practice this, the faster your signal stabilizes. The less time you spend spiraling. The more quickly your body finds center. Center is no longer a place you visit. It becomes where you live. And from that place, life organizes itself. Not around your plans, but around your presence. You stop forcing outcomes. You start following signals. You stop chasing purpose. You start living resonance. And in this resonance, you remember what you came here to do. Not to fix the system, but to embody a new one. One built on safety, clarity, and coherence. A system where regulation is sacred, where stillness is strategy, where breath is blueprint. You stop asking, what do I do next? And begin asking, what is my signal right now? Because you trust that the field will respond, that the right moment, person, opportunity will recognize you not by what you say, but by what you've become. You are the portal. You are the tuning. You are the coherence the future was waiting for. There's something tender about the end of a transformation, not because it's over, but because it no longer needs to be announced. The nervous system that once begged for relief is now quiet. Not because the world became easier, but because your body became safe enough to soften in its presence. You don't need fireworks to mark your shift. You feel it in the way you sit differently, speak differently, even walk differently. Your posture no longer curls inward to protect or flares outward to perform. You simply take up your space, and that is enough. Your breath comes home without permission. Your awareness no longer flees into fantasy or spirals of future tripping. It remains here, and here becomes holy. Even mundane moments take on new meaning. Washing dishes becomes meditation. Waiting in line becomes a breath practice. The pause between replies becomes a sacred tuning. It's not that your life changed dramatically on the outside. It's that your internal landscape now holds a new gravitational center. When challenges arise, you no longer react with flailing urgency. You respond with inner stability. Even when your voice trembles, your signal holds. Even when your thoughts race, your breath grounds. And in that subtle shift, the quantum field begins to treat you differently. Not because you're more deserving now, but because your vibration is finally consistent enough to be mirrored back clearly. There's a strange grace in realizing you don't have to be fully healed to be fully aligned. You don't have to eradicate fear to move forward. You only need to stop letting your fear drive the signal. Regulation doesn't mean you feel nothing. It means your sensations no longer hijack your timeline. It means your nervous system knows how to return again and again to its center. That return becomes your ritual, your rhythm, your way of feed. Being God, you no longer approach manifestation like a negotiation. You no longer plead with the universe to prove your worth. You've remembered that you are not separate from the intelligence that responds. You are the field, responding to itself. You are the breath, shaping the wave. You are the coherence that reweaves your life. From this awareness, small choices become sacred. You choose foods that don't just nourish your body, but your frequency. You speak not only for communication, but for alignment. You rest not as escape, but as recalibration. These aren't spiritual practices in the performative sense. They're expressions of internal tuning. When your nervous system is coherent, your lifestyle begins to self-organize around stability, clarity, and truth. You become incompatible with what drains you, not through rejection, but through resonance. The misaligned simply fades. And what remains is what reflects. You begin to trust slowness. Trust pauses. Trust the days when nothing seems to happen, because you felt how those days tune you for what's coming. You no longer mistake stillness for stagnation. You understand now that the quantum realm doesn't operate on visible motion, but on vibrational momentum. And some of your greatest shifts will arrive quietly disguised as subtle releases. Deep inhales or spontaneous tears with no story attached. These are not signs of breaking down. They are signs of tuning in. When someone asks how you changed, you don't offer a list of habits or breakthroughs. You say something like, I learned how to stay with myself, or I stopped running from my body, or even, I finally heard my breath. These phrases sound simple, but they carry the weight of lifetimes. Because staying present through sensation, instead of fleeing into projection, is one of the most radical acts of healing available. And now, it's not an act, it's your. Nature. The world may still misunderstand this. You might still receive advice from those stuck in cycles of urgency, hustle, and over-identification with mental logic. That's okay. You don't need to convince them. You are no longer in the business of persuading anyone to meet you in your frequency. Your only task is to remain tuned, to remain honest, to remain soft when the old world tries to harden you. And this task, this sacred commitment to internal congruence, is enough to ripple across timelines. Now, even when things fall apart, you don't collapse with them. You witness, you adapt. You respond from a deeper knowing that the field is not punishing you, it is positioning you, shifting pieces that your conscious mind can't yet understand, but your body already feels. You become less obsessed with outcomes, more interested in integrity, less consumed by appearances, more devoted to embodiment. And this devotion creates stability that effort never could. Your nervous system becomes like the trunk of a tree, deep-rooted, flexible, and patient. Wind may shake the branches, seasons may strip the leaves, but the center holds. Because it is not trying to become something else, it is simply being what it is. Alive, aware, aligned. You start to see others through this lens too. You feel the dysregulation beneath their anger, the contraction behind their control, the exhaustion under their productivity. And instead of judging, you witness. You offer presence, not performance. Space, not solutions. And in doing so, you become a safe place just by existing. Not because you have answers, but because your coherence reminds others of their own. The deepest teachers are often the quietest, not because they withhold, but because they've learned that transformation happens not through pressure, but through presence. And now, you are becoming one of them, a subtle transmitter of alignment, a steady resonance in the noise. This doesn't mean you've reached the end. There is no final landing in coherence. It is a living relationship, a dynamic dance with your breath, your choices, your perception. You will still wobble. You will still forget. But now you know how to return. That return is the real power. Because no matter how far you drift, you carry the map inside you. You no longer chase quantum outcomes. You live in quantum rhythm. And that rhythm doesn't move in straight lines. It spirals. It weaves. It hums like a hidden river under your routines. You may find yourself laughing more, crying more, loving without scripts, listening without agendas. Because when your nervous system is safe, your soul finally speaks. You begin to make decisions not from fear, but from frequency. Not based on probability, but on alignment. You no longer need the loudest signal to follow. You only need the truest one. And the truest one is often the softest dot. And now, the softest parts of you have become the most powerful. There's a threshold you cross when coherence stops, feeling like a state you enter and starts becoming the atmosphere you carry. It's no longer an achievement. It's your resting place. You wake up and your breath arrives without being summoned. Your shoulders no longer hold the ghost of yesterday's pressure. Your belly softens even before coffee, even before the to-do list clicks into place. You sit quietly not because someone told you to meditate, but because silence has become its own kind of nourishment. Coherence, by this point, isn't a peak state. It's an invisible architecture holding your moments together, even the messy ones, especially the messy ones. You no longer expect perfection from your healing. You no longer expect your body to stay calm like a statue. You allow fluctuation, because safety isn't the absence of sensation, it's the presence of response. You still feel fear, but it passes through. You still feel doubt, but it doesn't dig roots. The pain may knock at your chest, but the breath answers first. And this changes everything. This is what rewires timelines. Not your mindset alone, but your body's increasing capacity to stay present. Even when the signal gets noisy. By now, you've stopped chasing transformation as if it's a distant arrival. Point. You've remembered what the mystics always knew. Presence is the path. Not presence as a performance, but presence as physiology, as regulation, as rhythm. You feel it when your breath loops into itself without effort. When your speech slows in the middle of a sentence, not because you forgot your point, but because you remembered your body. You feel it when your energy expands without fatigue, when rest stops being recovery from burnout and becomes a sacred phase of becoming. There's something remarkable that happens when your biology learns not to collapse under intensity. You start to hold paradox with grace. You can feel both fear and love in the same breath. You can grieve and feel safe. You can ache and still trust. Coherence doesn't flatten you into neutrality. It expands your capacity to feel fully without drowning in it. This is the new intelligence. Not intellectual IQ, but regulatory intelligence, frequency intelligence. And it lives in your fascia, your blood, your breath. It's no longer enough to say the right words. Your body must agree. And now it does. Not all the time, but more often, more naturally. The gap between trigger and breath shortens. The moments of dissociation dissolve faster. The patterns of survival no longer hijack the day. You notice sooner. You return sooner. You remember sooner. That is mastery, not the absence of rupture, but the presence of return. The nervous system, once a battlefield, becomes a compass, and you follow it not blindly, but intimately. You know when a yes in your mind is a no in your body. You feel when you're being pulled off frequency not by external threats, but by subtle shifts. The tight jaw, the racing thoughts, the fog behind your eyes. You don't need alarms anymore. You feel the signal. And that signal is enough that you start to recognize when you're moving from coherence and when you're moving from contraction. And you choose, not with shame, but with sovereignty. You say, "This doesn't feel like alignment," and you pause. You say, "This conversation is too fast for me," and you slow down. You say, "I need to breathe before I respond," and you do. These aren't weak acts. These are the behaviors of someone who's made coherence a lifestyle. By this point, reality begins to mirror back deeper reflections. You start to receive invitations that don't require self-abandonment. You notice opportunities arising not through hustle, but through stillness. People begin to enter your life who speak the same frequency, not in language, but in presence. They don't rush you. They don't poke your old wounds. They don't demand that you shrink or stretch to. Make them comfortable. They meet you, not on the surface, but in signal. That's when you realize the field always responds to your coherence. It just needed time to catch up to your clarity. You also become far more discerning, not reactive, not rigid, but tuned. You sense when energy feels off, even if the words sound good. You recognize when an environment feels scattered, even if it's beautiful. Your coherence becomes your boundary. You no longer need walls, you have frequency. And that frequency repels what doesn't match without force, without fight, without explanation. It's not that you're rejecting the world. You're simply not compromising your rhythm to fit into a disharmonious one. And still, you're not. Above the experience, you're not detached or invincible. You're porous. You feel everything. But now, you feel from regulation, not from reactivity. You feel with grounded feet and an open chest. You feel from the place that trusts. Even, this moment is part of my tuning. There are days, still, when the old scripts tempt you, when urgency knocks, when the past loops around. But now, those moments aren't regressions. They're reminders. Invitations to recommit. And you do. You sit down. You place your palm on your solar plexus. You breathe. You say softly, "We are safe now." And your body, which once needed to be convinced, now believes you. This is the final threshold, when your body no longer braces by default, but receives by design. When your signal holds, not because you force it, but because it has become the only state that feels true. You don't manifest from craving. You create from coherence. You don't chase alignment. You are alignment. You don't try to convince the universe. You show it and the universe listens not in concept, in motion, in timing, in miracles that no longer feel miraculous, because they now match your frequency. The job, the partner, the opportunity, the healing. All of it arrives not because you earned it, but because your nervous system finally became available to hold it. You didn't make it happen. You became the version of yourself that could receive it. You stopped needing to be validated for your path. You stopped needing to be seen in your process. You stopped needing to explain your slowness, your softness, your silence. These are not passive traits. They are the signs of internal signal strength. And now, your coherence speaks louder than your words ever could. You trust that no experience is wasted, that even the tension, the grief, the doubt, all of it became material for tuning. Every collapse taught your body something. Every spiral rewrote a script. Every exhale rebuilt the channel. And now, those moments aren't failures. They're frequencies. And you've learned how to hold them. And so your life unfolds not as a sequence of goals, but as a movement of energy, as a continual recalibration, a listening, a receiving, a breathing. You move with the field now, and the field moves with you. You're no longer waiting for the shift. You are the shift. The signal you once searched for is now pulsing through your own spine, steady and clear, even when the world wobbles. You've learned that coherence isn't a destination, but a devotion, a breath-by-breath relationship with your body's truth. The field isn't separate from you. It's listening through you. And now, your presence speaks louder than your plans. So when things feel uncertain again, as they surely will, remember, you don't need to fix the future. You only need to feel the now. Inhale gently. Exhale fully. Let your nervous system remember what your mind forgot. You are already aligned. Stay with that. Stay tuned. And when you're ready, there are more stories waiting, stories designed to meet you right here, where awareness begins and the field answers. Subscribe so we can meet again next time. Until then, carry your breath like a compass and let your signal lead.